Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Thriving with Rachael and Dr. Lou. I know we wanted to touch base on, kind of what's happening in the world lately. I know that there's a lot of restrictions that are being lifted and, that can be very exciting for some people. It can be intimidating for some people. It can maybe be a little bit of both for some people. So really wanting to learn how to navigate that and, what that's going to look like for us, how to set boundaries, how to communicate our preferences and kind of how we want to navigate that. I think there's an expectation from the outside world of what's allowed, but that doesn't always,
Yeah, and what's allowed, but also what should happen,
right,
which may or may not jive with what's
best
okay
for
with
me.
you.
Right.
And I think one of the first things that I would recommend to people is be true to yourself. Recognize what's okay with you. There's a lot of people who are telling you this is okay, or this is okay, or this is not okay, or this is not okay. But figure out what's okay for you. And think about it. Like actually, maybe even write it down. Maybe talk to a close friend about it. And identify what is it that's okay for you. Whether it's going into a grocery store and no longer wearing your mask. Whether it's going back to a church or a sporting event where there's a greater amount of people in a closer environment. Do you still wear a mask, whether you're vaccinated or not? Like, these are questions that I think we all are kind of facing and trying to decide what to do.
And it could change day to day. I think asking that question,
2 years or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. But I think, your decision can change day to day. The other day I was in the grocery store and it was like everyone had their masks on. So I was like, I'm just gonna keep it on just because it felt like it was the norm. Like I was kind of flowing into that. But, knowing I'm vaccinated, I'm like questioning that sometimes. Like, why are you doing that? Or do you not feel safe? And so I think it has to go back to questioning what feels best for you, not necessarily what's the evidence or what are people saying, but what are you feeling comfortable with. And I think being true to yourself is a big part of that.
Definitely.
For sure.
And then the other thing is trying to get a community of support. We all are kind of feeling isolated this last year and a half or whatever, and now we're kind of being able to come back in person with people. Let's talk to one another. What are you doing? How are you managing and navigating? For example, I've been back to the gym for a little over a month now, and there's no mask. Most of the people are not wearing masks. Now we're obviously still cleaning down all the equipment and stuff before and after you work out, but there's no mask now. Going into Wawa, grocery stores.
Feels kind of weird, doesn't it?
It does feel weird.
Like you're doing something wrong.
Most of the time when I'm in there, if I see, like you had just mentioned, if you see a bunch of people who are wearing masks, you're like, oh, like...
I feel like I'm violating
should
someone.
Should I be putting it back on?
Yeah.
But that's a comfort level, right? And if you put it back on, big deal. Put it back on. It's not hurting you to do that, right?
I think the problem, though, is sometimes we don't trust ourselves, and we so often look to other people to tell us what to do, especially over this last year, which there's a big part of it that you did need to listen.
We wanted to know that.
You did need to know that, but I think as we're coming out of it, it's, not only being true to yourself, but just asking yourself. I don't think we ask ourselves enough. We ask everyone else. We ask everyone else for their opinion. We ask everyone else what we should do, and really just looking at yourself and recognizing it's not right or wrong, whatever I choose to do. If I choose to go out, if I choose to, whatever it might be. I think we need to go back to what's good for me to thrive each day. Is staying in my house helping me thrive? Yeah. Or is getting outside? Do I feel comfortable outside? Okay, well, what am I doing that more? Or am I saying, oh, well, things aren't outside, so I'm not going to do anything. I think asking myself outside of the box, what do I need? Not necessarily just with the restrictions being lifted, but even without them being lifted, am I doing things day to day that are good for me?
Yeah, and I think there's a natural anxiety that is coming up with all of these questions and these changes and getting back to what used to be in some ways.
Yeah.
And I think, we got into a way of being for a long time, even though it was very difficult to adjust to in the beginning when we had to go to mass and isolate and all that other stuff. But now that everything's opened up again, it's another adjustment. Even if it's something that we've been wanting to do, it's still a change. There's a transition. So be okay with the anxiety. Recognize that this is normal. It's okay. And I think another thing to do is when you're feeling this, go back to what's important to you. What's okay? What did you decide is okay? And why? Reinforce that. Use that information that you collected, whether you talked to somebody, you read something, or several things, and made your decisions, and then go back to how you made that decision and why.
Mm-hmm. And being okay with it.
Yeah.
Because I think that's, again, we get this tug of war if other people aren't supporting it, that I then discredit what I want. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because then, to your original point, we're not staying true to ourselves. And then there's that inner turmoil or that cognitive dissonance of, am I doing the right thing? Will other people accept this? Which I think causes that anxiety. So, I think accepting the anxiety to a degree, but also learning how to navigate anxiety. I think, at least for me, when I'm feeling anxious, I take that as a sign of I'm doing something wrong or something bad is about to happen, so I should stop doing this thing. But maybe anxiety is just part of change. Maybe anxiety is just part of this transition, and it's something that I have to sort of expect, not in a negative way, but just part of it, and that it's okay. Like, I can be okay and not feel wonderful during that transition.
And I think we want to use the anxiety cue to tune in. Right? Like, there's a reason we get anxious, like you said. Is this dangerous? Is this okay for me to do? And so one of the things that we need to do is ask that question, but then also answer it.
Right.
I think where anxiety kind of overrides us is we just stay in those questions but never answer any of them.
Right.
So ask the question, what are you worried about? But then answer that question. And then decide if it's not something that I need to worry about, or is it, okay, it is a little uncomfortable and I'm still okay, then can I proceed to do whatever that is? So be true to yourself. Figure out what it is that you want. Ask yourself these questions. And then also, one of the things that I also was thinking about is there's going to be different opinions, right?
I think we've all been in contact
and
with that.
Family and friends are going to do things, some will be similar and some will not be similar. I think we need to be accepting of each other. There's really no point in saying you should or shouldn't wear that mask, or you should or shouldn't do this, because that's for you to decide, and it's okay. It doesn't really hurt me whether you do or not, right?
Technically, I think there's beliefs out there, though, that says that's, maybe keeping me unsafe. If you don't wear it and I wear it, that I would feel unsafe.
Yeah, if I'm unsafe, then, well, I don't want to get into all of that, but you have to do what's right for you.
But to look at that, though, if that's I think that's a very real scenario for some people, though. And so does that mean that there's certain people that I maybe can't hang out with for a little bit, or in different capacities that I'm used to? Yeah, if that's something if that's being true to myself,
right,
then that's something that you have to answer. Because I think, again, that's where we're going to kind of butt heads with people is, well, I can't, hang out with you then if that's the case.
Yeah.
That might be the case then for some of us. Some of us maybe do need to be a little bit more cautious because of maybe life circumstances for ourselves. And I think that's something that we need to take into consideration, that if that's something that's best for you, then, that might be a boundary that you have to set. It's not wrong. It's not isolating. It's not, pushing people away necessarily. It's just reinforcing a boundary for yourself. And if people want to spend time with you and that's a boundary that you have, then that's something that I think we need to learn to respect one another, and learning that, you can be assertive without, pushing people away or cutting people out of your life.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because I think to be assertive, we first have to be true to ourselves, but then we have to speak our truth, right? And be able to share that. And
know that it will feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. So how do you assert what it is that's okay with you without offending the other person? Because I think sometimes people are worried about being assertive and they mix it up with being aggressive or being selfish, not thinking of others. Well, I think there's like a cheat way of looking at it, though. If you're being assertive, you're focusing on your needs. So a lot of I statements. If it's more aggressive, it's more a lot of you statements, a lot of more accusatory in tone. Yeah. So when you're setting a boundary, maybe let's say it's around masks, I feel more comfortable when I'm surrounded by people wearing masks. It would be helpful if that's who I was surrounding myself with. I feel more comfortable. Not you make me uncomfortable when you don't wear a mask, for instance. Right? That becomes very accusatory. That's you making me this way, and it's, that's blurred lines a little bit. That's not all accurate. Right? So I think that, I don't know if you have like quicker tips like that, but that's more so. No, I definitely agree. Using the I statements is important. Being able to be short and to the point about what it is that's okay with you, and owning it as a behavior, not as a judgment as to whether it's right, wrong, or you don't necessarily have to explain all of the background either. Like, I think it's important for you to be able to say, I'm comfortable doing X,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm. For me.
Period. For me.
Right.
That's not me saying you need to do the same thing, or you shouldn't do that, or this. It's I'm comfortable doing this, and that's what I'm going to do.
But I think a lot of times if we're caretaking in nature, a lot of times we will predict what another person or how another person might respond. Excuse me. And so we might go into something like, I know that you're not going to want to do this, or I know you don't want to hear this, but it's like, let's, let other people own their own boundaries.
Yeah.
Boundaries are for myself, and, they are involving other people a lot of times, but they're not necessarily made for other people all the time. Sometimes they are, but not all the time.
But also keep in mind that boundaries are only something you control for you. I can't make your boundaries.
Right.
Because I can't even enforce those boundaries. Even if I wanted you to do something, you have to choose it, and that's up to you. So that's not being selfish. It's actually being very practical. I can't control what you do or don't do. So my boundaries are for me.
What do you think is the reason why people struggle with boundaries so much?
I think part of it is control. They want to control the other in some ways.
Don't we all?
Right? Because then if you do what I want you to do, I'll be more comfortable.
Right.
So it's a way of tolerating my own anxiety or discomfort by being able to control you.
Right.
I think that's a big root to many of the situations. There's probably other reasons as well.
Well, I think like we talked about earlier, there's anxiety that goes into it, right? So my anxiety is put out there, and to your point, I try to solve the anxiety or get rid of the anxiety by trying to change someone else. When what I think we really want is to be able to be assertive, to be able to enforce boundaries. And if, there's comfort that I'm trying to find by setting the boundary, no, it's not going to come while you're setting it. Yeah. Right? But it's the outcome of the boundary that you're looking for. So as we were saying, biggest thing with setting boundaries, biggest thing as the restrictions are being lifted is to just be mindful of, doing things that you need to do, right? I forget how you phrased it in the beginning.
Choosing what's true to you.
Right, being true to yourself. Asking yourself what you want, what do you need, and recognizing that any change is going to come with anxiety or discomfort. And that's just kind of part of it. It's not necessarily that you're doing something wrong. But that any transition is going to be uncomfortable. But if it's being true to yourself and it's asking yourself what you need, then at the end of the day, that's probably the best thing for you. So to keep those things in mind during this transition, hopefully it's a good transition for all of us, but know that it's been a really long year and a half or so. And so it's going to be a long way out of it, and not in a bad way. So, yeah. But we'll catch you guys next week.
Have a good week, everybody.